Hello and welcome to the Irish Goodbye podcast. This is a podcast where we speak to people in their real lives, not the C suite, not the executives, not the magnates of industry, but real people excelling in their career, giving us some of the wisdom that's brought them through their life and giving them some of the pearls of education and little sparks that really got them to excel in environments that perhaps they felt uncomfortable in. And today I'm joined by Charles Mitchell. Charlie and I go back a very, very long time. We've known each other since we're probably 20 years of age. And I'm not going to say how long that is for either of us. So, Charlie, please introduce yourself and say hello.
Hi, Carl. Thanks very much for that. So I suppose for those of you that aren't aware of either of us, as Carl said, we worked together years ago. We met each other in a social setting and then ended up working together in the construction sector. So I worked as a quantity surveyor, or cost consultant, and some people would think about that. And in the American sense, I think it's the estimator's role. But I would have managed costs all the way through from the estimating of costs on construction projects through to final account and all the contractual negotiations. I was at that for a number of years, even to the extent of having my own company providing consultancy to both client and contractors. And got involved in the dispute resolutions world and ended up in the court system as expert witness, quantum witness on that basis. Recovery of large-scale debts like millions upon millions of euros and explaining the contractual relationships in that regard. And then the wonderful Celtic Tiger, our big boom that we had in Ireland, the bust came, and that changed a hell of a lot. So it was a case of the company ended up winding down, and over a period of time I ended up reinventing myself within the academic world, because I always liked to assist people moving through, say, the professional competencies and becoming. We have a system in Ireland whereby you become a chartered surveyor. So I used to do a little bit of work with that and aiding people going through. But initially I was working with the Chartered Institute of Building doing that. But then moved to the Society of Chartered Surveyors, helping other professionals in that regard. But what really helped me there was I became an academic for 10 years. So for a guy that didn't want to finish secondary school to becoming the guy teaching the course that he studied in third level education, that was kind of, that was one of those look in the mirror moments and go, "What God, where did you go?"
That's awesome.
More recently then, as Carl's aware, as we caught up a while ago, I ended up, because of work I did from an academic perspective, getting involved in the political world, but not as a lobbyist, but actually as a policymaker in the Irish government. So that's what construction policy is where I am at the moment, and kind of moving into the sustainability aspect of things as well. So an interesting journey, I think.
It certainly is, one with a few twists and turns in it. One of the things I like about it is that I think about you a lot when I do this. You didn't want to finish university, and then you became an academic for 10 years. I didn't finish college, and now once a semester I give speeches at Florida International University about how to navigate life outside of college. So it's amazing how it dragged you back in.
What's even funnier than that, though, Carl, is like I didn't want to finish what the equivalent of high school. Then I ended up reluctantly going to college, then enjoyed that, then ended up doing 3 years full time, went back in part time, and we're talking over a 30-year period. I just did my viva for my second master's last Thursday. So I've done 13 years as a student, as well as I've actually done as much time as a third level student, a university student, as I did between primary and secondary school. So my father jokes about me being a slow learner, but
yeah, I think my father would say you're just trying to avoid work.
There could be truth in that one.
There could be.
He has actually mentioned that to me when I met him out.
That kind of brings us to my next question, which is in that meandering and fulfilling journey you've had from, as I said, we worked together in the construction industry. When I had a subcontracting company, we would come and you would be the estimator we'd have to bid to and then, get paid from, right through to your academics and your policy making. Is there any other job in there that people wouldn't have expected you to have?
Well, the one that people don't expect when I tell them about everything I've done and the qualifications is the fact that because of the recession, I ended up unemployed for 3 months. Now, I made sure to close down my business because I had this whole thing. I remember people like yourself going out of business, and at the time were struggling, and companies and basically being left hanging for money is the best way to describe it, where people had no remorse over it. That's just business. If we lose, you lose. And you're kind of going,
Yeah.
I didn't want to do that. So I managed to close my business down, but then I ended up basically on social welfare myself. And that didn't do my psyche any good. That was kind of like, you have failed. And I couldn't accept it as a crutch. So I got a job with a minimum 15-hour contract on minimum wage, well, a little better than minimum wage, but still not great money, as a home support worker, right? And so after all these years in college, suited and booted on the steps of the High Court here in Dublin, making deals over hundreds of thousands or millions of euros, and now I was down to basically going in, prepping people's meals, giving people showers, getting paraplegics out of bed, looking after them, all their personal hygiene care and everything else. And do you know what? Yeah, probably one of the better times in my life as I settled into it. Even after being that MD of my own company and everything else, now I was somebody that other people depended on, and they're people I learned more from than some of the my Merc driving colleagues. And don't get me wrong, I'm picking on Mercs because everyone looks at the Merc as being the big bus, and like we've all had different stages. Doesn't make the person, just gets them somewhere.
Is there a humility or an empathy that you've taken from that has been a constant thread then through the rest of everything you've done?
Yeah. To be honest with you, I did always care about people. Mightn't have shown it, but I did care about people.
You hit it sometimes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. When it came to money now, no, I wasn't very caring at all. But I never wanted to go out and purposely cause anyone's business any injury. Like, you know what I mean? Like, but still had to be fair and reasonable. But the benefit of this role is, okay, not a nice story. Viewer discretion on this one, right? But arriving in, taking the keys out of a key box in a particular client's house as a home support worker, and going into the house and kind of going, that's not a nice smell. Yeah. And as I made my way up to this particular paraplegic, he had a colostomy bag, right? And it turns out, as I went in, he goes, who is it? And I called out to him on the way upstairs that it was me. He knew one of us were coming in. He had the roster. And he goes, oh, I'm glad it's you. I said, boy, he said, but I'm a very stupid man. And I'm there kind of going, why are you stupid? He goes, can you not smell it? I said, I think we have a bit of a job to do, all right. Right. And as I got up there, it turns out he'd had a little issue with trapped wind, had tried to release it, but ended up. Let's go back to construction for a minute. A bit of pebble dashing done.
Right.
Okay. And he goes, I'm a stupid old man. But this man was in his late 70s, early 80s. He couldn't get out of bed without assistance. We were to get him out of bed, get him downstairs, feed him and everything else. And I went in. All the place was horrific. It was horrific. And he just goes, I'm a stupid man. I said, did you do it on purpose? And he goes, no. I said, are you more comfortable now that the wind is gone? He goes, yeah. I said, and that was when the start of the discussion came about. I'd used this phrase before. He goes, I'm a terrible man. I said, hang on. I said, and it was something I'd used with a subcontractor years ago. I said, do we have a problem or do we have an issue? And he goes, it's a problem. I said, no, definition's wrong. I said, it's an issue. I said, you resolve issues, problems linger.
I like that.
I said, this is an issue. I said, we're going to get over this. And his comment to me after that was, I'm glad it's you and not one of the others. And I said, why? He said, because they would give out to me for this. I said, but what's there to give out about? This happens.
Of course.
Right? Now, don't get me wrong. Geez, I earn my money in that, because I'm only in for an hour with these people at a time, right? So I had to do everything else and tidy the place up.
Yeah, but if you take the situation that he was in out of it, you just treated somebody with dignity regardless of the issue. And that's,
but you know what? We had a good relationship already. Now, I'd only been seeing this man a few weeks. But after that, it was like there was no boundaries in the whole thing is, okay, well, what way we approach this? Come on, let's work this out together.
Yeah.
And that actually taught me a lot of lessons, because that 1 minute, as you said, the humility piece, right? We had that in there, and he realized that it was non-judgmental.
Exactly.
And we were able to work our way through it. And we never talked about it again. We just worked everything out all the way through. I view that education was key on that one as well, right? Because the thing about education is, so I worked, as it was for those that aren't aware, the Dublin Institute of Technology, now the Technical University of Dublin, but it was founded on vocational education. So brought everyone through from apprenticeships all the way to doctorates. Okay. But it was meant to be access for all. And I love that piece, because my father kind of, his education, like he's an older generation, his education was to the end of primary school. And then he went through the trades from about 14 years of age onwards. And built his own business, and he looked after us very well. Right. So I love rough diamonds. Simple as that. Diamonds are key.
Well, I love that you just mentioned that, because the next question I have for you, I think, leads into that. It'd be, what mistake have you made that's given you more wisdom than any course or any book or any, doctorate or MBA that you've done has ever taught you?
Okay, so it goes back to coming out of college after the first 3 years, and maybe there was an air of arrogance associated with the fact that I was now a trainee surveyor, right? And I was in this job. Now we were doing utilities work, right? So it wasn't very glamorous. Like we put ducting in the road. We did a lot of kind of how can you put it? We used to get task orders and go out, and we managed people all over the Dublin city area. But I was one of only 2 quantity surveyors, so probably had my own head up my backside, to be quite honest with you, to an extent, right?
Yeah, but middle management often does. Like, a little bit of power is more corrupting than a lot of power.
Oh, yeah, but I just thought I've done it now. I've got the qualification. I'm out there. And there was this lady in there, right? And she was there a long time. She was the receptionist and the PA to the director, like a small company, turning only about 7 or 8 million pounds at the time, which current days money probably about 20 million a year, right?
Yeah.
So people said, geez, I wish my company turned that. But for the type of work they were doing, that was small enough at the time. But I don't know what it was. Or, like, at that time, I didn't know what it was. I know now that probably my heirs and graces, right? But she didn't like my boss anyway, so she didn't like me. And I actually started getting I started getting headaches and everything else, and stressed out over this woman and the whole lot. And then one day I just decided, you know what, I'm gonna have to turn this rapidly. And actually, it was on a good night down at the beach house, Carl, as you remember, the good old beach house.
Yes, few of those.
There was a lot of Jack Daniels taken, right? And I kind of zoned out, and I was fixated on this. And one of my friends, she turned around to me and she goes, "Are you okay?" And I said, "I'm going to kill her." That was the comment. And she got very worried about me, because she thought I was in this drunken kind of homicidal rage. And it wasn't a rage at all. I said, "I'm going to kill her. Monday morning, I'm going to kill her." And she goes, "What are you on about?" I said, "With kindness." And she goes, "What?" "I'll get back to you next week." Right? So Monday morning, this was Friday or Saturday night that it happened. So I'm in there on the Monday morning, and I arrive in. I won't mention this lady's name. But anyway, walked in the door, and she was just smug and smart and everything else, just the way the relationship had developed. And I was like, just did my bits and pieces. And the way out from the office that I'd been in, I said, "Do you remember you said something to me last week that I didn't really understand this?" And she goes, "Yes." And she got all defensive, thinking it was the start of an argument. "You're probably right. Can we sit and discuss this at some stage?" And she goes, "Oh, what did you do discuss?" No. Will you explain to me what I don't know? And then we move on from there. And she goes, "What?" I said, "Think about it. And if you have time, I'd appreciate it. And if not, thanks for trying to fit me in and trying to explain stuff to me." And she rang me the next day, and she goes, "If you're around, I have a half an hour." I said, "Give me 5 minutes and I'll be over." She told me a lot of stuff that I didn't know, and a lot of stuff that I did know. But as you'll understand, it's hard for me. I shut up and listened. Right?
Yeah.
It doesn't. And then the relationship over a period of time got steadily better. But I started to become more efficient in my job because I actually had that ability. Now, I utilize that a lot more now, and as I've got older, that whole thing of I don't know everything, right? There are people who will teach me, and they're at every level.
Funny you say that, right? So I mentor quite a few people within my job and outside as well. And one of the phrases that I ask them to use is rather than, "Oh, tell me about that," or "Tell me about this," because it's nearly a demand of their knowledge. But if you use the phrase, "Can you help me understand?" they're more likely to lean in and help you understand, because what you're actually showing is a want to understand their view as opposed to a demand for knowledge.
But look, I made a mistake as well. I think it was frustration. Some of the classes I taught were spread out over the course of a day, and there was one particular day, it was a 14-hour day in the classroom. Now, I wasn't in the classroom for, like, I had kind of 4 hours early in the morning, like 9 o'clock until 1. And it was all a lot, because of what I was teaching, there was measurement and that. So you had to kind of make sure I could dictate, but I like to actually engage with the students and make sure it's good and the practical application. But somebody did something that night, and I think there wasn't enough coffee or something in my system. And it was a mature student. And I said, whatever way, my comment was really, really dismissive. And I walked away from the person to go to another person. And then I stopped. And I came back and said, "I'm sorry." And they went, "What?" I said, "Can I sit with you for a minute?" And I said, "Okay." I said, firstly, I said, there's two things here. One, I need to apologize. And the reason I need to apologize is I did not carry myself anyway professionally, either as a surveyor or as a lecturer, in the way I actually just told you that you were wrong at something. Because I pointed out one thing and fixated on that. I said, "Can I look at your work again? Because you see all this." I said, "That's all perfect."
Also,
said,
you
was terrible.
You make them terrified then to ask a question in the future. So it's not only about that moment.
Yeah, that would have ruined my teaching style. My teaching style was meant to be interactive. I wanted discussion. I wanted people to say, "But can I not do it this way?" Right? I liked that somebody would question, because that questioning could lead to an innovative process.
It could, but it also shows a level of either understanding or lack of understanding, or, as you said, innovation. Or I'll give you an example. I'm dyslexic, right? So I approach things verbally more than written. Now, leaps and bounds in technology make it way easier for me because it corrects a lot of my dyslexia. Previously, it didn't. And I remember, and this, I'll give you your flowers here now. When I had the construction company, I remember you saying to me, "There's a couple of ways you could do your quotes and your invoices to me that would make it easier for me." And you changed how I invoiced. And that trait has been in you. So that's part of your makeup, not your learning style.
No, and look, to be honest with you, that was one of the things there was one of the, much as I say that I've done a few different courses, there was one I was kind of forced into and I didn't want to do it. And that was a third level teaching and learning course. I was part of my contract as a you can't get a qualification to be a lecturer, but you have to do a qualification in order to stay a lecturer. Which is quite, I started going, okay, yeah, so you're going to hire me not being qualified and then qualify me.
They don't have that for doctors.
Well, we can debate that one. But the way it turned out was that there was a bit of fluff around this, because it was philosophy of education, and it was kind of, I found certain aspects of it was bigger words to describe the same thing. But the practical application of knowledge was something in the construction kind of sector that was already there, the apprenticeship models and kind of learning by doing. And even that whole learn by doing piece was brought up in my own viva voce for the master's dissertation there last week, where they kind of went, "We can actually see a practical application of our knowledge." And I said, "It's not practical. There's no point in asking me to wax lyrical about the inside of a ping pong ball if I'm not interested in ping pong balls. Simple as that." So if I don't see a practical application, it's very hard for me to actually kind of dig myself.
I find that too, but I think that might come from where our career started in construction, right? Because you're not going to start hanging I-beams if you haven't built a foundation.
Yeah.
Right? So things have a process, things have a way. And I've noticed that through my tech career, that if I go in and I'm speaking with the clients and they ask me about AI, I'll ask them about their structured data first, because there's no point in having AI without structured data.
And they're the type of conversations that I'm having now. But what I didn't realize from all the stuff that I've learned over the years, up until like I have this excellent person working with me at the moment, right? And if you just to explain, so I'm a technical person in my role, but I have generalists with me.
Okay.
And those generalists don't come from any particular stream into what we do. We just get them, and that's just the way it works in the government world. That they're obviously at a level of intelligence that you can plug and play anywhere. And yeah, in some cases it works. In this case, it works really well. But the work stream that we have is working around data and data analysis, but construction related. And it's all the data that you and I would have put together, all that stuff from how you said about putting that information in a particular way. And they're the conversations we're having now. So this lady is able to teach me about process mapping and little bits of coding in that as well, and she's teaching me elements and I'm teaching her elements. And we don't need to understand it to that like kind of finite detail, but we need to understand the process so that, and I've seen her pull stuff out of the bag. And part of it is about empowering these people. I think within our first 3 or 4 weeks with me, the first day I frightened her because I said, I'll be a success as your manager when you get promoted away from me. And she goes, what? But I've only just arrived an hour ago. And you're already telling me I'm leaving. I said, well, in 2 years' time, you're out for internal competitions. I said, my job is to have you ready. She goes, but what about the work we're going to do? I said, oh, no, you'll be doing that. I said, but your PMBS, our annual kind of assessment, that's going to be based around what we can achieve together. I said, but if you're not noting down all the ways that you've done this around capabilities and competencies and being able to shine, well, then I said, I'm not being very good to you.
I love that. So I have business development reps and SDRs that work with me. And my first comment to them when I meet them is, if you haven't been promoted by the end of this year, we've let each other down.
Yeah. Well, I understand that, yeah. And
you shouldn't be scared to let your talent grow and meander, but also to always be there as an encyclopedia on the shelf that they can always come to and ask a question of. That's the way I like to myself to people I've worked with. But with that, have you ever felt like you're in the wrong room, or have you ever felt like professionally or personally something that you've achieved that nobody sees and maybe it gave you an imposter syndrome at some stage?
A lot of stuff around COVID. So coming into this job, right? So after 10 years in academia, I've been doing research on different things, but I hadn't been in the surveying field to the extent that you would have known me to do. Right. It was all about that theoretical aspect, and I was doing some research into kind of reporting systems and being involved in international standards, and that was all great stuff. So then I come into this role, and this role is kind of just, you're talking 2019, and so late like September 2019, and then we get into 2020 and the world just stops. So we've Brexit coming down the line. That has, what's their impact there? Can you tell us what it's going to do to construction in Ireland? And they're kind of going, yeah, give me a go. Yeah, I'll have a go at that. Yeah, fair enough. And then so I'm back into economic modeling, stuff I hadn't done in years, trying to come back on that, but look at the real cost of it, not just bits and pieces. So a kind of a little bit of imposter syndrome in that room. But where the big one came about was I was sitting into a meeting, and I was basically told, can you sort out price variation clauses in our contracts? And I was like, this is something that's there since 2007. Like, you know what I mean? Here we are 13 years later, in this case of all of a sudden we realize it's not working the way it was intended, and nobody actually expected the situation that we have now. And I suppose, so for me, I was there kind of going, oh my God. And I literally just said to my boss, I said, can everyone just stop talking to me for about 3 days? I said, I have an idea, I just need to play with it. And then I think for the first half a day of that, I sat there kind of going, is this going to work? Am I the right person for this? Should we be looking to somebody else? Now, take into account as well, we're an influential unit, but we're a very small unit. And I was the only one from a cost background in the whole unit. And we're talking about contracts that we're talking about billions per annum. As case of, yeah, can you fix something here? I went, Jesus. But I suppose from a personal basis, there was a big press release a couple of months later. Right, I'm down. Right now, just my dad, right? So my dad's a small contractor, and you know that if he wants to say something to you, like your own dad, he'll say it.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, kind of all feelings to be checked at the door, please.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so like typical Irish, good old 1940s Irish stock. Okay, so if you don't want to hear what I'm saying, walk away now. That type of affair. So dad anyway starts on this rant. And the rant is because there's a big press headline, and it's the government is giving 70% of all material price increases to the builders that are on public works contracts. And dad starts on this rant. Now my wife's sitting on the other side of the table, and she's there kind of looking at me, and she's smiling, she's kind of nodding across, kind of going, tell him. And then dad keeps going. He's about 15 minutes into this. It's fabulous. He's there's a structured argument here. He's just venting. I actually thought it was great for his blood pressure. Right? It was just everything was.
He's purging himself of everything.
All together. And then he looks at me. Now, just reminding you as well, right? When you see a headline, it doesn't have facts behind it. It's just whatever would sell papers. Right? And he goes, just stops abruptly, looks at me, like the brother's there, sister-in-law's there, my kids are there. My kids knew that I'd been working on something for ages. And dad just looks at me and goes, you've got something to do with this. I mean, why am I going to blame this? You're too quiet. You're just letting me rant. And I said, do you remember one bank holiday? Like this is all during COVID and that as well. Like right. Only back into seeing family. I was sitting in a room. I said, listen, I'm going to have to work for a few hours. And I was working away, and it was just a spreadsheet. He came in, he looked at me, just tapping away on the spreadsheet. Kind of go, don't know how you do that for hours. I went, no, it is what it is. And then he goes, how much of this are you involved in? I went, it's my scheme. He goes, oh, so we're grand then. The country won't go broke. You're fine. And I just went, why is that? And he goes, oh, because you're miserable. I went, I'm not that bad. But from a personal basis, dad walked up to me later, like a couple of weeks after this, and he just there kind of going, did it work out? And I went, it seems to be. And he goes, how did you come up with that? I said, just try to be fair. Just try to be factual. Try to be fair. I said, not like it wasn't just given away. It was a share basis. It was X, Y, and Z. And he kind of goes, no, he said, I read more into it. And actually, I'd sent him, WhatsApped him the link to our press release as well, where he got to see a bit, not all the detail of it without going into it, but he got to see the main bones of it and what the minister had really said. And he just told me, he goes, you get this to a minister. He said, are you comfortable with that? I went, yeah, that's the job now. I said, but to be honest with you, I said, like what I said to you, I walked into the room after saying, leave me alone for a few days. And I sat there kind of going, really? Am I going to do this? And I did. And to be honest with you, that was lovely, because it made me realize that whilst I was happy to do it when I was working with you on sites and I was working for managing directors and everything else of companies, to realize that I was able to do something that stopped quite, like it could have actually strangled a few companies if we hadn't done this. It has been described by certain commentators as the event that stopped the economic crash that never happened. And you're kind of going,
that's incredible. Ooh.
And that was a nice one. And don't get me wrong, like it might sound a bit big enough, but if you think about it this way, in every economy, construction is a large player in development. If your construction sector has slowed down below a particular percentage, you're gone. So for me, right, I'm trying to do something within society through the sector that I'm there. But what I have learned through dealing with all these people is I don't have to be purely involved in the construction side of it. It's the attributes that you have and how you apply them. You've shifted over to a different sector, right? You're utilizing skill set that you've developed across multiple sectors. If you pigeonhole yourself, you can't give out about other people pigeonholing. That's
I love that. I love that. And just for the anybody in the US watching this, Ireland got to the stage where it was paying €300,000 for a bike lane, for a shelter to put some bicycles under, right? So it really needed to check itself. And just to add to Charles' comments here about his father, I think the closest I ever got from I'm a proudy by my dad was, geez, you didn't make shite of that. You
That's
know,
a
so
high
that
compliment though for most dads in Ireland, though, to be honest with
I know that's how an Irish father pays you a compliment.
you. Yeah,
So look, you
like
were
he's not
kind
good.
of at the end of that, you harbored back to your younger self again when we were both in construction. So if you met your 25-year-old self now in a bar for a pint, what do you think would surprise them most about you, about where you are now? Other than the fact that hair now grows out the bottom of your head, not the top of it.
That was a windy day. We've had a couple of storms here.
There you go. There you go.
But no, I suppose, look, to be quite honest with you, at 25, I thought I was going to be a managing surveyor, and I thought that's where I wanted to go. And I was actually more into as yeah, kind of. So I started as a quantity surveyor. You train as a capitalist. Simple as that. I thought I was going to be running a large scale tier one contracting firm. That's the way I thought I was going to be. And that's what I wanted. And now, if I was to sit with myself now, and I think my 25-year-old self, if he could figure out what a socialist was, would be asking, why does he look like a socialist now? And then when you start talking to me more so about what I do, and thinking that I'm a total eco warrior as well, which I'm not. I'm kind of a mix of all three, which is really bad for the therapy sessions. But I think if I was sitting telling them about where things were going to go, and that it's not actually about having tons upon tons of money at the risk of losing everything else. It's actually about finding that balance. And that what I'm doing now, I found a balance where I can actually do what was actually something I wanted to do in the beginning. I've still got commercial acumen. I had a inclination towards politics, but to be honest with you, I'd be the worst person in a party because I don't like the party lines. But now I actually get to set or improve on policy and give something back to society. And that's, I suppose, yeah, I had that kind of inclination, but the fact that I can do it in a very meaningful manner across a broader spectrum, I think my 25-year-old self will probably look at me and kind of go, there's no way we're capable of that. Not a hope in it.
There's something you said there, and it's about kind of the inclination, and something I'm glad you pulled on. There's a thread you pulled on there. And it's I don't know if you saw the previous interview with Brian, and something I love as well is that your 25-year-old old self isn't looking at you in the same career that they were in or thought they were going to thrive in, right? So it's okay to change at whatever stage. Like I moved to America at 40. Most people, friends of mine through love, told me you're too old to do it again. Like, and maybe they were right. Who knows? Like I could be dying on my ass over here, but what would you say to anyone who, or what advice would you give to someone who feels a little bit stuck? Just whether it's the balance, whether it's just not loving the career they're in, or just for any reason, just if any advice you give.
Well, look, we've all kind of gone through that in the sense of like I actually did it in my teaching career where I felt stuck at that point. And part of that was I hate repetition in my life. I know people say, oh, I like a routine. Well, on the 1st of September, knowing what you're going to be teaching every Monday morning for the next...
Yeah, it has to be growth. It has to be growth.
Yeah, so I need growth in what I do, right? And I think most people need growth. Don't get me wrong, other people love doing the same thing every day, but there needs to be some kind of purpose to it, right? But for me, it's about growth. So I suppose conversation I had there recently with a friend is very capable in their roles. Needs to and is expanding on what they do. They're doing multiple courses to make them specialists in their area, but like in niche areas of their area, if you know what I mean, if that makes sense. Like a doctor who decides they're going to go through and become a consultant in a particular area. This person is a construction professional consultant and looking at that. But the question arose is, well, why don't I just apply because they're having a bad time where they are work-wise, they're thinking about moving. But for them, not a move similar to yourself, moving within Ireland. But the problem with them moving, as I said to them, is, are you moving just to do the same thing somewhere else, but for someone that you're not fully aware of. And if you are, why are you removing yourself from the situation to go into another situation and leaving behind your support mechanisms? And this person needs the support mechanism of the club, the friends, the family. And not only will they have to reinvent themselves kind of in their workplace, they'll have to reinvent themselves in their community. Now, you did that and you're capable of doing it, but not everyone is able to do that.
Well, it's funny you say that, because the first 2 years I was miserable. I was lonely, I was scared, and I was miserable, and I couldn't admit it to anybody, even myself.
Yeah.
And I was here for 4.5 years, and I went to England, and I didn't enjoy England, and I had a network of friends around me. And it wasn't England I didn't enjoy, it was the job. And I moved back to America. And it's only in the last sort of 5-6 years that I've really found happiness and comfort here. And when you move away, your demons will find you. You don't need to distract yourself for so long. My wife says to me all the time, she's like, listen, like, I moved from New York to Miami, and she goes, they're going to find you again. Your demons will knock on the door.
They're in that little like those guys have how do you put it, free passage no matter where you go.
Oh yeah. Right? Yeah, they don't stop by TSA agents.
Well, people, I was chatting to somebody there a while ago, right? This was a member of staff, not my staff, but staff within the unit I was working with somebody else. And we're having a conversation, trying to get them ready for competency-based interviews is what we do. And every time they were asked a question that was sticky around the competencies, which they were capable of answering, by the way, they'd panic and deflect. And everything became somebody else was the problem for that. And you're kind of going, no, that's a really bad answer to say somebody, you would have done better if it wasn't for somebody else. But deflection was a superpower for this person.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So if I'm stuck or if I feel I haven't progressed there, I'm going to blame somebody else. But that came from an underlying anxiety, a depression, and other bits and pieces. The person says, I'm working through that. And I said, yeah, but we all work through that. She goes, but you have it all together. I went, no. I've been on a journey.
I'm going to challenge you on that, because I think there's something there that you're glossing over a little too easily because it's in your nature. That sort of deflection and that sort of lack of want to have accountability comes from an environment that doesn't support honesty, whether it's positive or negative.
Yeah.
So if you're in a position, and look, I've worked at various companies here and like within tech, within construction and whatever else, right? I'll break it down. I played rugby, and I know you played sport, you cycle, and you're part of a team. If your teammate doesn't pull their weight, there's two ways to do them. You can encourage them, or you can kick the shit out of them. You're going to get more out of them, you encourage them, like, Cardi, you let me down here. I need you in this moment. Or, fuck's sake, Charlie, you let me down. They're it's the same comments, but two very different delivery methods.
Yeah, but that's it. It's kind of, it's whether one is kind of, don't get me wrong, where people say, oh, you're going to have to be kid gloves with everyone. There's times when the pointed comment and pointed tone has to come. But if, like, I've done mentoring through the workplace as the mentor, and then I've done the whole thing with, like, geez, like, I would have been pastoral care teams within the student cohort, could have had up to 100 students a year, and you were the one. And even when they were no longer in your year group, I still have students that I taught 10 years ago sending me messages through LinkedIn saying, any chance of a chat? I'm kind of going, okay. I kind of go, like, firstly, I'll always throw my eyes up. I'm very busy. I can't do this. I guarantee you I'll ring them.
Yeah.
I'm a bit of a spanner that way.
You're a good guy, and it's part of why we had you on the podcast. And
yeah,
I just want to say, go on, finish.
Yeah, sorry, but what I was going to going back to that person, right? Deflection as a superpower. We do it, and it's where you don't feel supported, or where you're not supported, or where in the business case you're micromanaged but not allowed to make decisions, to analyze and decide. And it's back to what we said earlier on. You made the comment, if you're not getting promoted in a year's time, you failed at the other. That's the opposite side, right? Whereby there is that support. Like, I've had a boss there recently, and he's turned around to me and go, oh yeah, I need to do more to support you. And I started laughing at him. And he goes, oh, you find that funny? I said, no, I find you funny. And then he goes, yeah, you're not making this conversation any easier now, you know? You might have to flesh this one out a bit. So as we did, I just sort of said, do you not realize how much support you give us? And he kind of goes, but look, I don't have the time to do it. I said, hang on. I'm coming back to that case with the price variation stuff, right? I said, you do realize when I told you to leave me alone, that you left me alone, you let me deal with it. And I came back to you and you didn't want to annoy me, but you give me a few days. Like, and he goes, yeah. I said, that's actually quite supportive because you're letting me go off and puzzle it away. And I know as soon as I need you, I'll tell you. And I said, and if you think something's worth my while, you don't come to me and say, you need to talk to this guy. You say, have you come across this guy so far? I said, why do you phrase it that way? And he goes, well, because you have a better network than I have. And it's more than likely you're already there, but we just haven't caught up on it. And I went, well, actually, yeah, we're actually engaged with that guy for the last 18 months. And he goes, oh, brilliant. So I don't have to worry. I said, do you ever worry? He goes, no, not really. Not with you lot here. Right. Yeah. But the thing is, he's built a team that works. And more recently, right? How about this, right? So we ended up taking part of a team with us when we moved divisions. And this sounds terrible. I'm going to talk about grades of staff, right? So we do have we have administrative grades, which wouldn't be in the managerial aspect of things. Right. And what came about was one of the junior members of staff turned around to her boss and said, sorry, stop what you're saying. Right? And they said, why? And she goes, do you not realize the type of unit you're working with? You're not going to be micromanaged here. You've now moved into somewhere whereby your comments are required. They're deemed a necessity. You don't have to say something every day. But when you have something to say, you're meant to say it, even if it's not in line. She goes, you're being given the chance to innovate. You have your role. He's not going to knock on your door every day and say, this is what you're doing today. You have to talk to him. She goes, now you have to have like the big person pants on. And I was there kind of going, you're only in this unit a couple of weeks. She goes, yeah, but I was watching when I was in the other unit. And because I had an interaction with you guys. And you weren't waiting to be told. You were all part of the process. And you didn't have to be told the processes. It wasn't like stopwatch has started.
I think that's a great lesson for anybody who'll be watching this who's looking for management. That's how a management team should lead, right? That you have autonomy to speak.
Yeah, but this man, so I like the masters I just completed is all about leadership, and I was talking to my boss about leadership, and he kind of goes, "Oh yeah, well I'm a far way away from that." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Oh well, I'm in a management role." I said, "You're leading this team." I said, what's the lifespan of people in most people's teams? He goes, oh, well, 2 years. I said, many are here 3 years plus. And he goes, the majority are. I said, some of us haven't looked to leave yet. We're enthused by the work, but we can only be enthused by the work because we're allowed to do it.
True.
And I said, you share with us what you can, and maybe a little bit more at times from the management board, within reason, nothing too sensitive, but enough to give us a go. And then we're brought to meetings and we're allowed to express ourselves even to more senior management. Because like, unlike a company, I'm in a government organization. It's all about bureaucracy, right? And there's certain elements of that are very great. Oh, sorry, are you talking to me? You're not on my pay slip. You can't talk.
Yeah.
Now, that's not as prevalent as I make it sound, but there are certain people and you can never get by them.
The old guard can be like that. So look, as we're coming to the end of this, first thing I want to do is thank you for your time. You and I have been friends for a very long time. We've worked together. Obviously, we've sunk more than a few pints together. And, I thank you for coming on here and giving me some of this wisdom. There's nuggets I've taken here, and I hope that anybody watching has too. And the last question we always ask on this podcast is, you're getting up, you're about to do an Irish exit, and you want to leave a little bit of wisdom on the bar behind you. So you're going to write a little bit of wisdom in the back of the napkin, slap it on the bar for the next people coming through. What is it?
Oh, There's no quick way of saying it, but I'll try and be quick. Doesn't matter who's sitting beside you, they can always teach you a lesson. Simple one there. And that comes from the experience. I sat beside the guys that were digging the roads. I sat beside the guys that took in all the money and had a selection of Rolex watches. They all have nuggets of information. But don't discount somebody just because they don't have a Rolex. Okay, everyone has value. Everyone can add. That'll be the big part.
I love that. I love it, and it's so simple but true. Charlie Mitchell, thank you. You're greatly appreciated, and now we're going to do an Irish goodbye. Take care of yourself. Sláinte.
Pleasure.